A clemency request denied for a convicted serial killer on death row.
Christy Tedesco joining us now. And Christy, this is the first action taken by Governor Kelly as she's asked to review some of the state's most notorious death row inmates.
That's right, it is. So we'll have much more of these coming. But today, she denied the clemency request of John Robinson, now 82 years old. He killed 7 women and a teenage girl in Kansas and Missouri, cases dating back to 1984. Investigators say he lured some victims with promises of work or sex and stuffed some of the bodies into barrels. Robinson got the death penalty in 2003, and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear his case nearly a decade ago. In a statement, Governor Kelly says Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994, and it remains the law today. As the existence of a credible claim of innocence or evidence of manifest injustice are absent in his request, I have denied John Robinson's request to commute his death sentence. Now, an attorney for Robinson also providing reaction to this, saying John Robinson is almost 83 years old, one of the oldest death row prisoners in America. Given his age, his medical condition, and his ongoing legal proceedings, it's nearly certain that he'll die of natural causes before Kansas is in a position to execute him. By denying him clemency, Governor Kelly has ensured that the state must continue to waste vast resources defending his death sentence instead of resolving the case with a sentence of life without parole. Robinson was the first clemency application, as Rachel said, that's received from the Office of the Governor. Lawyers for other death row inmates still waiting for their decisions, including the Carr brothers, Scott Cheever and Justin Thurber. Rachel.